The Parthenon, symbol of democracy, monument to human achievement, built with coins earned from the sale of women's bodies. Every marble column, every carved frieze, funded in part by brothels that the Athenian state licensed, regulated, and taxed. The same civilization that invented the word freedom had codified sexual slavery into law. Rows of 8-foot rooms in the Kerameikos district, women branded like livestock, names scratched into walls alongside their prices. This wasn't hypocrisy. This was architecture. And for 2,000 years, historians buried this truth beneath marble myths and philosophical grandeur. They taught you about Socrates and Pericles. They never told you what funded their world. What you're about to discover is how the birthplace of democracy became the blueprint for state-sponsored sexual exploitation, how women were sorted, priced, and branded, how philosophers debated justice while sitting beside women they'd bought for the evening, and how this system didn't just shape Athens, it became the template every civilization after copied and refined. At the foundation of this system stood the Kyrios, the male guardian who held absolute legal authority over every woman's existence. No woman, regardless of age or circumstance, could conduct business, own property, or make decisions about her own body without his consent. For those forced into sexual commerce, the Kyrios was not protector but proprietor. He determined her price, her clients, and her fate. The state reinforced this control through meticulous legal frameworks. Brothel licenses were purchased from city officials, creating a direct revenue stream that flowed into public coffers. Each establishment paid regular taxes, transforming human degradation into civic income. The very democracy that Athenians celebrated was partially funded by the systematic exploitation of women who could never participate in it. These women were sorted into rigid hierarchies that reflected their market value rather than their humanity. At the bottom labored the pornai, street prostitutes who sold their bodies for mere obol in cramped brothels or darkened alleyways. Archaeological evidence from the Kerameikos district reveals rows of single-room structures, each barely large enough for a sleeping mat, where these women lived and worked under constant supervision. The pornai bore visible marks of their status. Many were branded or tattooed, permanent reminders that they belonged to someone else. Their movements were restricted, their earnings seized, their lives reduced to a series of commercial transactions. They could not refuse clients, could not leave their assigned quarters, and could not appeal to any court for protection. Above them in this hierarchy stood the hetairai, educated courtesans who commanded higher prices and greater freedoms yet remained fundamentally enslaved. These women were often former prisoners of war, captured when their cities fell to Athenian expansion. Literacy and musical training made them valuable commodities, able to entertain at symposia where respectable wives were forbidden to appear. The hetairai moved through elite social circles, engaging in philosophical discussions and political debates, yet always as property rather than participants. They could quote Homer and play the kithara, but they could not vote, own land, or determine their own destinies. Their education was not enlightenment but enhancement of their commercial value. The mechanisms that trapped women in this system were brutally efficient. Debt slavery ensnared freeborn women who could not repay loans, transforming temporary financial hardship into permanent sexual bondage. Once caught in this web, escape became nearly impossible. The law offered no protection and society offered no sanctuary. The state's role extended beyond mere taxation. Official inspectors monitored brothels, ensuring compliance with health regulations designed to protect clients rather than workers. Women showing signs of disease were removed not for treatment but for disposal. The same civic machinery that maintained roads and aqueducts maintained the sexual marketplace with cold administrative precision. Even marriage offered no escape from this commodified existence. Athenian law treated wives as vessels for legitimate heirs, their sexuality monitored and controlled with obsessive precision. A husband could divorce his wife for adultery and retain her dowry, but he faced no legal consequences for his own extramarital affairs with prostitutes or slaves. The double standard was not cultural accident, but legal architecture. The gynekeion, The women's quarters within Athenian homes functioned as domestic prisons where wives lived in seclusion. They could not leave without permission, could not receive visitors without supervision, and could not participate in the public life that defined citizenship. While their husbands debated democracy in the agora, these women remained invisible, their voices silenced by walls of marble and law. The symposium revealed the deepest contradictions of Athenian sexual culture. These elite drinking parties brought together the city's most powerful men to discuss philosophy, politics, and poetry. Yet the same gatherings that produced profound insights into human nature relied on the systematic dehumanization of others. Hetairai provided entertainment, pornoi served wine, and citizen wives remained locked away at home. The conversations at these symposia often touched on themes of justice and virtue, yet the participants saw no contradiction in their treatment of the women who served them. They could debate the nature of the good life while denying basic humanity to those who made their pleasure possible. The wine they drank and the bodies they consumed were equally commodified, equally divorced from moral consideration. Archaeological evidence from symposium vessels depicts these scenes with stark honesty. Red figure pottery shows hetairai reclining alongside male guests, but their posture and positioning mark them clearly as entertainment rather than equals. They hold musical instruments or wine cups, never scrolls or writing tablets. Their nudity contrasts sharply with the draped garments of citizen men, visual reminders of their different legal and social status. The economic mechanics of this system created powerful incentives for its perpetuation. Wealthy Athenians invested in brothels as they would in shipping ventures or mining operations. The returns were predictable, the overhead manageable, and the state provided both legal framework and physical protection. Human misery had been transformed into financial opportunity through the simple mechanism of law. The taxation system reveals the state's complete complicity in this exploitation. Records from the 4th century BCE show that sexual commerce generated substantial revenue for public works and military expenditures. The Parthenon's marble columns and the long walls connecting Athens to Piraeus were built in part with coins earned through the sale of women's bodies. This revenue was not incidental but integral to Athenian public finance. The state actively encouraged the growth of sexual commerce through favorable regulations and protective enforcement. Brothel owners who paid their taxes received official support in disputes with clients or competitors. The machinery of justice served the machinery of exploitation with bureaucratic efficiency. The physical spaces where this commerce occurred tell their own story of systematic dehumanization. Excavations in the Kerameikos have revealed brothel complexes with standardized room sizes, shared courtyards, and central monitoring points. These were not places of pleasure but factories of exploitation, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The rooms themselves measured barely 8 feet square, with stone platforms serving as beds and small niches for personal possessions. Graffiti scratched into walls records the names of women and their prices, creating an archaeological ledger of human commodification. Some inscriptions plead for mercy or curse abusive clients, rare glimpses into the inner lives of those trapped within these walls. The medical understanding of female sexuality in this period reflected and reinforced these exploitative structures. Physicians like Hippocrates described women's bodies as fundamentally unstable, requiring male control for proper function. This pseudo-scientific framework provided intellectual justification for legal and social restrictions, transforming domination into medical necessity. The wandering womb theory held that female reproductive organs moved throughout the body, causing hysteria and irrationality. Only pregnancy or sexual submission could stabilize this dangerous mobility. Such beliefs turned women's exclusion from public life into therapeutic prescription, making their subjugation appear both natural and beneficial. These medical theories shaped legal practice and social custom throughout the Greek world. Women's testimony carried less weight in courts because their unstable nature made them unreliable witnesses. Their exclusion from religious and political roles was justified by their supposed physical and mental deficiencies. Science had been weaponized in service of oppression. But here's what they don't teach you in history class. This system didn't collapse, It didn't reform, it metastasized. When Rome conquered Greece, they didn't destroy this machinery, they improved it. The Roman lupanar adopted Athens' licensing system, its taxation structure, its hierarchical categories. They added regulations, expanded enforcement, and scaled the operation across an empire. The legal frameworks created in Athens, the ownership laws, the guardianship requirements, the medical justifications, became the foundation for sexual commerce throughout the Western world for the next 2 millennia. Medieval Europe, Ottoman Empire, colonial America. Every civilization looked back to Athens and found not just philosophy and democracy, but a perfected blueprint for transforming women into state-regulated commodities. The graffiti scratched into those 8-foot rooms in the Kerameikos still exists. You can see it in the Athens Archaeological Museum. Names, prices, desperate pleas for mercy. But here's the revelation that makes this unbearable. The last legal brothel using Athens' licensing system, the same taxes, the same inspections, the same state-sanctioned exploitation, didn't close until 1999 in Greece, 2,400 years after Pericles gave his funeral oration about Athenian liberty. The marble columns still stand, the philosophers are still quoted, the democracy is still celebrated. But the women whose bodies built that world, their names were scratched into walls that archaeologists now catalog like artifacts. Athens didn't just create democracy. It created the system every civilization after used to reconcile freedom for some with exploitation of others. This is the architecture they don't show you in the textbooks. This is how freedom became flesh.